8 former Catalan ministers who were jailed for their role in attempting to break away from Spain will find out shortly if they will be released on bail. They are facing allegations of sedition and rebellion against the state, very serious charges, after declaring independence on October the 1st. They hope to campaign, though, in the regional elections in Catalonia on December the 21st, later this month. At the same time, in Brussels, an extradition hearing gets underway against the former Catalan leader Carles Puigdemont and 4 other former regional ministers. Let's go to Madrid and get the latest from our correspondent there, Gavin Lee. I think this announcement's been delayed, Gavin, but a pretty important decision, presumably centring on whether any of these men will be a flight risk, bearing in mind that Carles Puigdemont has done precisely that.
Yeah, in fact, that was the reason that, go back a couple of days on Friday, that the 8 ministers asked for this special hearing at the Supreme Court behind me. So the journalists around me, most of not just Spanish media but the world's media, are at different points, and at the prisons too, the 3 prisons where the 8 ministers and 2 activists are, they pledged on Friday not to abscond, and part of the reason they're in custody in the first place, Tim, as you know, is because for the past month there was seen to be a risk that they could go to Belgium, like former President Carles Puigdemont. And the fact is that the whole of the separatist government is in court today, either in Madrid or in Brussels, 2/3 here in Madrid, the other third, including Carles Puigdemont, right now in the hearing in Brussels. That will be for the defence hearing. They're all facing the same allegations. They haven't been charged, remember, but they're alleged to have carried out sedition and rebellion against the state, one of the most serious crimes in Spain, carries up to 30 years in prison. But the extradition request is going on in Belgium. We're not expecting a ruling until next week here. Well, it's worth saying that in about half an hour, expecting a decision. Can they be released in time for tomorrow, which is the campaign launch official for the elections in 3 weeks' time? Now, their argument is that they acknowledge the system that the Spanish government has taken over, the emergency measures, 155 it's called, of the Constitution. But here's the thing, Tim, a couple of nuances. On Friday, when they were last here in court, some of the ministers, including the former Vice President Oriol Junqueras, refused to talk to any of the prosecution, only his lawyer, and the lawyer said it's because they didn't recognise the Spanish system. And lawyers are suggesting, well, they may get a different outcome, possibly today.
OK, and the Spanish government will be watching this closely because those elections coming up on December the 21st, I mean, the way with political leaders still being held in custody, how that could influence the elections, presumably foremost in their minds.
Yeah, bear in mind, I've been back and forth between Madrid and Barcelona and elsewhere, and actually in that time you get to see how divided things are, and there's lots of, the imprisonment of the ministers in their own right. And I know privately from talking to senior sources in the Spanish government, they are concerned about the martyr effect, that this will galvanise support for the independence movement. The fact is that some of the ministers have spoken through their lawyers to say they've witnessed one inmate stab another in front of them. So we have an issue with that. Just bear with me a second, Tim. I don't think we've got any kind of ruling coming through at the moment. It's being shown something coming from the court. OK, so we've been told that in the last minute or so that 4 of the ministers will remain in prison for the moment, and 6 of those ministers were being told will. OK, so we have a $100,000 bail in the past few seconds for 6 of the ministers. They will be released on bail. So effectively, if that money is paid by tomorrow, they will be campaigning in those elections. We expect, in fact, that money will be paid today. So there we are. Breaking news, Tim. 6 ministers will be released from prison today to campaign in those elections. But the Vice President, who was the one, I said a moment ago, Oriol Junqueras, who refused to take questions other than his own lawyers, he will remain in prison along with another 3 ministers. That news in the past few seconds.
OK, that's interesting, because also held in custody were the 2 men known as the two Jordis, Gavin, who were leaders of civil movements. Now, they've been held for longer than the other members of the Parliament. I think you're getting a bit more information, so just tell us about that. So the 2 Jordis, they might be released, might they? And those civil movements, Gavin, have quite a lot of money, and in the past, when people have been fined, those civil movements, those street activists have been able to raise the funds, haven't they?
Yeah, there are slightly different charges related to the two independence activists, because that relates before the elections. Remember, so we had this period of incredible events. We had this banned referendum, and we saw the image, I think, that most people remember, that the violence that was used by police at some polling stations where we saw women being pulled by their hair. Well, in the lead up to that, there was a big... the police were trying to basically stop the referendum taking place, the Spanish police, and basically some of the ministries where some of the information were being held about how they plan to use the referendum. Some protesters had started to jump on police cars, and the police were talking about violence there. Now, the two organisers of those events were these two, Jordi Cuixart and Jordi Sanchez as well. As you said, both of those organisers will remain in prison. And that's because they are facing sedition charges. I spoke to the wife of one of the two yesterday, Jordi Cuixart's wife, on Friday, in fact, and she was saying that she will be deeply concerned that they may well stay in prison. So, as I say, 6 ministers likely to be released today after paying $100,000 in bail money, so they'll be campaigning in the elections tomorrow as a campaign starts. There's 4, including Oriol Junqueras, the Vice President, to remain in prison for the moment.
OK, Gavin, with that breaking news there from Madrid, thank you very much.